Greetings and welcome to this next installment of DEI in About Five, brought to you by Sweet Ransom Diversity Consulting, and I am Robin Sweet Ransom. All right, I really appreciate you joining me again to discuss this sensitive topic of systemic racism. So, last time we focused on the fact that our healthcare system's water supply is contaminated, and we observe that a particular race or races have been adversely impacted and suffered unnecessary and preventable deaths as far as COVID is concerned, as well as when it comes to maternal deaths. And so now I'm going to unpack this a little further and dig a little deeper. So remember I said that with this groundwater problem, it really does not matter the person's socioeconomic background, their education, or what have you. They still may be impacted by the systemic racism. And we left off talking about maternal deaths and how Blacks and Indigenous women suffer deaths 2 to 3 times higher than their white counterparts. But you know what? That was just poor people. Let's continue. So, millions of Black women are disbelieved by doctors. Even Serena Williams. She nearly died after initially being ignored when she requested a CT scan. So let's back up. So Serena went in to have her baby, and she intended to have the baby vaginally, but it was determined that she was going to need to have a C-section. Fine. She had the C-section and she began to experience some problems breathing, and she became alarmed and she began to express her concerns to her healthcare providers. Now, she learned back in 2010 that she has a susceptibility to getting blood clots. First saw them in her legs, and so being mindful of this, she began to know what she needed to do in order to prevent the problem from becoming deadly. She learned that a heparin drip could help manage the clots or keep them from forming. And so when she started having these problems, she knew something was wrong. And so she asked for a heparin drip. And she even mentioned this before the surgery, that this would be what she would need. And she wasn't given it. In fact, one nurse had the nerve to tell her that the meds she was on was making her crazy. Now, can you believe that? Now, let's back up. If any woman is in tune with their body, wouldn't it be Serena Williams? One of the reasons why they didn't want to give her heparin or blood thinners is because they were concerned that with the C-section that she just had, that she would continue to bleed and that would be a problem. Well, she continued to struggle to breathe and she began to cough so hard that she burst her stitches, and they had to go back and repair that. And then they finally listened to her and gave her the CT scan, and guess what they discovered? Lo and behold, she had developed blood clots in her lungs. She could have died because they didn't want to listen to her. Now, if a woman with all her wealth, her fame, and her education couldn't get the care that she needed and her great insurance, what's to be said about others who don't have all of that? But I dare say a white woman having the same resources as Serena wouldn't have had to fight so hard to get what she needed. And I dare say a white woman without all of her resources would not have had to fight so hard. So, what is going on? What is the problem? I'll close on a personal note. So, back in late February, I was having some problems breathing. I went to the ER and it was so crowded. I was ready to leave. I was thinking, well, what I'm experiencing, I'm sure is not life threatening. I can come back tomorrow. But I began to share with the person who admits you and how hard the difficulty I was having breathing, and how I love to walk, but it was hard for me just to walk through the parking lot. I was so out of breath. So he said, given the symptoms that you've just described, I encourage you to stay here. And he whispered to me, I'm going to put you ahead of everyone else in the waiting room because this sounds really serious. So he took it more seriously than I did. Bless his heart. And I will say, shouldn't need to be said, but I will say, he was a very kind Caucasian gentleman who took care of me. And they did put me ahead of everyone else. And they began to run all types of tests on me, couldn't discern what the problem was. One of the ER doctors said, you know what, I'm going to send you home with an inhaler. And I don't have asthma. But then he thought about it. And I attribute this to the good Lord. Jesus took care of me that day. So he said, you know what? On second thought, why don't you do a lap around the emergency room back here? Not the waiting room, but where the patients are. And he had a nurse go with me, and I was connected to this monitor. And I had the hardest time making that short lap. My numbers were through the roof. The doctor then said, oh, no, this is not good. I'm going to order you a CT scan today. I didn't even know to ask for a CT scan. I was too ignorant to even realize how serious my situation was. They did the CT scan. The results came back immediately, and it was discerned or discovered that I had multiple blood clots in both my lungs. And we didn't know where they came from. And it happened rather quickly because the breathing problems, I could just say, were just really over a period of a few days. And so, in any event, they admitted me, they kept me for 2 days, they put me on blood thinners, and I began to immediately feel better. And I'm supposed to be on blood thinners for 3 months. I've got a month and a half down. I got a month and a half to go. And I feel great. I can walk like I enjoy with no problems. And I have to put a plug out there for Kaiser. I have Kaiser insurance and they took fantastic care of me. So, why did I share that story? I wanted you to know that it's not doom and gloom for everybody completely, right? I was taken good care of and I'm a Black woman. But that should not be the exception. That should be the rule. Wouldn't you agree? So, join me on the final installment of systemic racism, and I'll end on a positive note. There is a solution. We can work together to find that. And remember that diversity plus you equals solutions. Join me again on DEI in about 5.